Hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. We have here Jason Jeffay, it's okay, as I announced it, and Vlad Bog. Thank you for being here. I know Vlad for a while, I don't know, 2 years maybe, something like this. And I'm very happy that we have this opportunity to talk about something very important nowadays, something very innovative, which is also very important nowadays. But first, I would like both of you to say a little bit about you so our viewers would know who they are watching.
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to come and chat with you. So, yeah, I am Jason. I have been a consultant for my entire career in the area of people and organization. I started my career at Hewitt Associates, which at the time was the second largest global HR consultancy before it was sold to Aon in the early 2000s, when I was the practice leader for talent and organization consulting. And then after a short stint consulting on my own, I went to Mercer Consulting, where I was the leader of the leadership and organizational performance practice. And then in the last about 12 years, been back consulting on my own using the simulation talent chess that I developed that we will talk more about today.
Yes. Vlad, what about you?
So very different career from Jason's, apart from the fact that we both studied finance, which I think it's probably going to come across during our conversation today. I studied financial investment banking, and then I started my career in sales, and then I somehow accidentally ended up in human resources later on. And I've done 32 years of corporate career in companies like Microsoft, Coca-Cola, Vodafone, and so on. And in multiple countries, I had regional responsibilities or global responsibilities in most of that time, going up to 43 countries when I was at Coca-Cola. 25 years of those 32, I was responsible for talent management, either globally or regionally or for a certain geography. And you know, when you do corporate jobs for so long, you realize that there are very few things that actually really work. And I came across talent chess, you know, which is what Jason does or created as a client first, you know, and it completely changed my perspective about things, and it made me realize that I was doing a lot of things completely wrongly, although I thought that I was doing them very, very rightly. And that's when I decided that, you know, I need to do this thing. So yeah, that was my end of my corporate career. Yeah.
So instead of changing the corporation, decided to leave. It's a good choice.
Yeah.
Probably the best one, you know.
Different one. You know, it has benefits and disadvantages too. You know, but
of course. I remember about 2 years ago, or 2 years and a half, when I initiated the community, the Smart HR community, and I started to organize those online panels. I was in the search of valuable people to join as speakers, and I think 2 or 3 people told me about you. I don't even remember who, but told me about you, and I looked up for your profile on LinkedIn, and I said, I cannot contact this guy.
It's funny, you know, because I had several people, you know, who told me that, and then they're really surprised by the fact that I'm really available. I always was, you know, and frankly, I think this helps me now as a consultant, because, you know, I was talking to a very good friend of mine, and I was saying, you know, as long as at least you did not do bad to people, And, you know, particularly if you also did good to people, you know, then people pick up the phone. And when you're a consultant, you know, this is important.
It is, because, you know, it's a new world. When you leave the corporation, when you had maybe a high role, you live there thinking
that you are someone.
The universe, yes, and everybody will come and join you and search you and chase you and things like this. But when you don't have the brand behind, many people tend to forget about you
very quickly. You know, it happened to experience this thing when I quit Coca-Cola and I was moving to Vodafone, and I actually negotiated 2 or 3 months in between. You know, so nobody knew that I would start at Vodafone. You know, all they knew was that I left Coca-Cola. And before that, I was invited, you know, all newspapers, I was in articles, I was the most desired HRD, you know, in Romania, etc., etc. And all of a sudden, radio silence. Like nobody would call me, nobody would contact me, you know, for a couple of months. So that's when I realized, you know, I am nobody without a brand behind me. So when I became independent, you know, at least I didn't have the wrong expectations. I knew that I would become nobody.
Yeah,
you know, very quickly.
Nobody, you wasn't nobody. How was about you? Because you also made this choice to leave a company.
Yes, and it's exactly as you said. When I was the global practice leader at these big HR consulting firms, I could call most any country in North America, South America, Europe, Asia, and I could introduce myself and said I lead the practice at either Hewitt Associates or Mercer, and you know I could get a meeting with them. You know, we arrange schedules and whatnot, but they'd be willing to meet. Then you leave and you say, now I'm the head of Jeffay Consulting, and I call a CHRO and say I would like to get together and talk about some of the things that we're doing and see what's going on, and they go, huh? So those consultants who have made, you know, who have gone out on their own, the biggest challenge that they have is you leave generally with a set of client relationships that, you know, they will continue to work with you as you go individually. The hardest part about being an individual consultant is acquiring new clients, because again, you cannot just approach them because without the brand, they're not going to spend time with you. So,
yes, this is of course a very good, very big challenge. Even, you know, in this period of time, there is a phenomenon in Romania, and I think around Europe also. I don't know if in the United States, is the fact that many people around 45, 55 of age, who exceeded high-level roles are willing to change the corporation with something more flexible or, I don't know, not so stressful, or the corporation are changing, moving by boat or whatever, and they out of the roles.
yes.
And it is very difficult for them to find the way because they have high expertise, but also high expectations, of course, in money. It should be like this.
It's true, but it's part of a broader trend that we've been seeing over the last 10, 15 years, but will become probably accelerated more with AI, and I'm sure we'll end up talking about AI because every conversation ends up talking about AI. But and the way I put it is that organizations need talented people more than talented people need organizations. And so what I mean by that is when I started my career, which was back in the Stone Age when we just invented the wheel, I could not become an individual consultant. I needed the infrastructure and the resources of a large consulting firm to provide the research, to give me data to go out and talk to clients about, to be able to reach and access clients. I could not do that on my own. I needed the infrastructure of a firm. But now, today, and any individual can create their own brand. there are tools, whether it's through LinkedIn or various other social networks, or podcasts, such as this. You can reach out and access clients and get your message across. So you are far more able as an individual to be able to do things that you used to need a large organization to do. So people are much more empowered. Now, it takes a certain mindset and willingness to take risk and entrepreneurialism, which some have and some don't. But for those that have it, they don't need companies as much as they used to. And you're seeing this in all the professional services, whether it's investments, whether it's banking, consulting, certainly. More and more boutique shops or single individuals, because the tools and resources through the internet, through social networks, are the ability to do research now is ubiquitous. It was somewhat with just the internet, but even more so with AI. You can create your research and get your message out there that didn't exist, before.
It's true, but on the other hand, the competition is higher, and what is maybe more delicate is that the fake competition is out there, which you are fighting with.
Yes.
I suppose that you too, because having so easy access to this kind of tools, they offer you also the freedom to be anyone or to claim to be.
Yeah. So there is a lot of sort of buyer beware, and there are a lot of the range of quality of in what I'm used to consultancy is really quite large, and companies generally are. That's why they tend to fall back on relationships and using the people that they know and trust, because they need something to ensure that they're going to get the quality that they're expecting.
Yeah. But about that category of age, there is also a lot of assumption that they are expensive, like is one of them, because not necessarily. Many of them, especially the 55, 50 plus, 55, etc. Many of them, they have their kids out of home now, so they're pretty much independent. So actually, their needs are less than they were before. So many of them are actually a lot more flexible. They have plenty of experience, and many of them just want to be useful and they want to do something fun.
Have activity, because it is important to have your break.
Absolutely. So you can actually get a lot of those resources for a lot less money than the assumption says. Then there is this other assumption that, that they're 55, so they don't know anything about AI and so on. That has nothing to do with age. It has to do with curiosity, and you'd have curious people and not curious people. And you have somebody who's 20 years of age and doesn't have a clue about using AI because they're simply not curious. So there are a lot of assumptions, and especially in an age where AI is used a lot for, the pre-selection, at least of CVs, the way in which the AI is preset to select the CVs actually throws in the garbage bin the most interesting CVs because they are non-linear. And non-linear CVs are typical pretty much for those whom we call high potentials, who are the people who are motivated by new and different things.
Yes.
You see? So you end up actually with people who are linear, nothing bad about it, only that, an organization of any kind needs both types of people, more and better and new and different people, linear and non-linear.
Yes, it's true. I think one of the things that I learned in talent industry is not to make assumption for everything. So this is very valuable to learn that.
We were talking yesterday, actually, yesterday or the day before, we traveled around Europe, in the past 2 weeks, so we spent a lot of time together.
We are the merry band of brothers.
Yes. So we visited our partners in Germany and had meetings with a lot of clients and deliveries and so on. And he was saying, I would have never hired you at Mercer You know, and I was like, why? He said, based on your CV, I would have never hired you because, typically people who are corporate, coming from corporations, they're never good sellers, And but I am. And he says, yes, you are an excellent seller. And we concluded by the fact that, if I was to want to become, a sushi chef, I would probably become a sushi chef because I'm just very curious and I like to learn. So that's the most exciting thing for me. So, when I started, as a consultant and I had to sell, don't imagine that I, started selling all of it. I mean, it was really, really hard. But I started to read books and, and to do things and to test and to, and retest and try this and try that. And eventually, things started to come together.
So the time is important for everything to give some time to arrange. Do you think there is a change of let's say mindset, but I'm not sure if this is the right word, in talent industry now versus, 5 or 10 years ago? Generally speaking, then we'll go more concrete.
Yeah, I think yes, and not necessarily in a good way. Because again, I think that AI is bringing a lot because and social media, because you have access to a lot of candidates very easily. But then the problem that this brings is you have to deal with a lot of CVs, with thousands of CVs. So you have to find a way to sort them out. And a way to sort them out is to automatize, a number of things. And AI is very, very useful because but then, when it comes to actual fit, and actually, getting to understand somebody's experience, unfortunately, AI cannot help you. But what AI may do, if you don't set it up correctly, is to actually throw away in the pre-selection and selection phase the most valuable CVs. And this is the danger of it. The danger of assuming that everybody who's 45, 55, is expensive and probably brain dead by now. So yeah, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's the idea. So that's how I see it a little bit.
I guess talent and HR overall is a fairly low innovation field for a variety of different reasons. Over the last 10 or so years, what has changed is new tools, new processes, to take advantage of various technologies. There's been a lot of focus on how the work of HR and how the work of talent management is getting done and what's enabling it. But there hasn't been a deeper level of thinking and innovation to, rather than just thinking about the process or the tools, but to really say, how can this be done? How can we get to a better outcome? So HR overall, it's always interesting to me because I do come from the finance background. I studied investment and portfolio theory in business school. And I thought I was going to go into finance, but I ended up going into people, which I'm still not sure why. But if you compare finance and HR, as disciplines within an organization, it's a very interesting comparison. And HR has a lot of processes and a lot of steps that it makes people to go through. But at the end of the process, they leave it up to the individual manager to say, okay, now you make the decision. And you decide, and whatever you decide, we're not here to tell you what to do. We're here to give you the tools and process to enable you to hopefully do what you want to do. Finance takes a very different approach. They don't have as many tools or processes, but they care very much about what decision you make. And they oftentimes will say, well, no. You're not going to do that. That's a bad decision. That's a bad use of our resources. And so it's an interesting comparison. And generally, finance does a better job within the organization and has more organizational stature and power than HR because they manage much more through governance of the decision, whereas HR tries to manage the process, and outcomes are determined by decisions. So the financial outcomes are determined by the decisions leaders make to spend money. And that's what finance focuses on, are making sure that leaders make good financial decisions. HR takes the approach of, well, if you follow the process, we hope that it will lead to a good result. But all the studies, academic studies of sort of process management, is good process can prevent bad result, but good process does not always generate good result. So it's more like it's a safety net to prevent something bad from happening, but it doesn't necessarily determine a good outcome. And so in talent, there's still the focus on, well, we can get a better process, we can get a better tool, we can enable managers to do this with, at first it was just through, through the internet and then through outsourcing, and now everything's about AI, but they're not yet getting to how do we change the outcome? How do we get leaders to make better decisions around talent? And how do we get to the end result of we have a stronger base of talent within our organization?
Yes, because the process of recruitment, for example, it is very much, or the outcome, of the recruitment process is very much influenced by the hiring manager. Very much. I think that maybe 80% of the outcome is influenced by that, because in the end, he's the one who's saying, I'm hiring this person or not, or in the most of the time. And moreover, is the person who will be working with a new hire. So if the relationship will not be good enough, or the process will not be good enough, then we will have a bad outcome. Because an outcome of recruitment is not when the person is hired, but I think at least 6 months after the hiring, because that person needs to be onboarded as well. Mm-hmm. In that perspective, do you think that only the tools matter, or how much tools matter in that good outcome or not?
So maybe step back and say, is that the right outcome? So let's say you have two candidates. One candidate has deep experience and expertise in the job that you are trying to hire for. And that person can step in and do the job today and be, a good performer very quickly. Is not going to need a lot of intervention or training or coaching or whatnot. But that person is just good at that job. They probably could not go and do anything else in the organization. Now you have a second candidate who maybe has less experience in the particular job. They may have some, but it's less. But they have a track record of always exceeding everything that they've done. They have that curiosity that Vlad was talking about. They have the mental acuity to learn and grow. And you could see that person, they may start in this particular job, but they're going to probably be a high performer almost anywhere they go. And you could see this person ultimately being a very senior level person in the organization. Now, the manager, the hiring manager, their motivation is often, I want to hire somebody who can do the job today and is going to take the least amount of effort on my part to get the person onboarded and get them. It makes my life easier if I hire the first. But the organization's interest, what benefits the organization, is getting great talent in, people who can do the job but have potential to go off and do other things and to ultimately become strong leaders within the organization. So the organization should want the manager to pick the second, but the manager, if we say, you just choose who you want, they're always going to be motivated to pick the first. And that's the role why you have to have governance to say, we want leaders to make good decisions, but that sometimes the decision that they will reach rationally, and they're not bad people, they're making a smart decision when viewed from their lens. But when viewed from the organization's lens, it's not the right decision. So we should challenge the idea that all decisions should be left to the individual manager. There are some decisions perhaps that should have broader input and broader decision making. Because again, if we let each individual manager make decisions on how much money they think they should spend, they think it's a good idea to spend however many thousand euros to buy this machine or this whatever. If we let managers make that decision by themselves, we'll go out of business because everybody's going to go crazy. But with people, we say, no, we'll enable you to make the decision, even if it's not the best decision for the organization.
Do you think that HR should have a higher role in this decision? Maybe.
Yeah, we really believe that we should help leaders, have better tools to make those decisions. Because, for us coming from a financial background, coming into organizations, it was shocking to see that, for financial decisions, you have very clear processes and structures and ways in which you assess risk and which you can calculate return on investment. You're looking at what are the alternatives, what's the scenario A, B, C, before you make such a decision. When it comes to people decisions, they seem to be taken very lightly, not based on a lot of data or analysis. And if you think about it, those are the most important resources an organization has. It's financial resources, money on one side, and people on the other side. And you cannot have a business without either of those. You need both. So how come that one of them we manage so carefully and properly, and the other one not?
Yeah, it's a good question because there are so many companies around the world that calling themselves people-centric companies, or they are declaring that the humans or our employees are our most important resource, but in the same time they don't act like that.
No, because they don't know how to. It's a non-manifested intention. The intention is nice and it's noble, and I believe it's true, But then we mix up the right decision with being respectful and good to people, which are not the same thing. We are there to conduct a business. So any decision, financial or people, needs to be properly structured. It needs to be robust. And how do you make robust decisions when it comes to people? We simply do not teach our leaders how to do this. And neither we do teach our HR how to do this.
I want to get back to your question because it's a very interesting one. Should HR be making more of these decisions instead of the manager? And there was a time in my own thinking and as I've been consulting with organizations where I thought that was the answer. And I thought that's what we needed to do, is to not let the manager do it, and HR should step into that and make those decisions, kind of more like finance oftentimes will do with financial decisions. But as I got more into it and perhaps got a few more gray hairs and what passes maybe for wisdom, my thinking has shifted, and I really don't think that's the right answer for HR to make those decisions. The business needs to own the people in the same way that the business needs to own their financial results. They need to own their people results. But that still doesn't mean that you let the individual manager. We do an exercise in our workshops. We oftentimes start with it where we give them two cards. The first card is a financial decision, and we say, one of your subordinates comes to you and says, I'd like to go out and make this investment to buy a piece of equipment. It's more money than I can approve. It's hard to put a dollar or euro number on it because it depends on the size of the organization. But so just assume it's a big amount. And so it's more than I can improve, but I think it's a good idea. It's going to save us money in the long run, and I'd like to go ahead. And so, you say, okay, what questions would you ask if your subordinate came to you with that decision? What questions would you ask? What data would you want to know? How would you go about evaluating that decision? Who else would be involved in the process of making that decision? And they're usually able to talk because there's a structured financial process in the organization to do all those things. Then we give them the second card and it says, your subordinate comes to you and says, I'd like to promote this person. They're fairly junior, but I think they have a lot of potential. It's going to take them some time to get up to speed, but in the long run, I think they're going to be a fantastic performer, and they're really going to drive a huge amount of results for our team. And we say, ask the same questions. So what questions would you ask? What data would you look at? Who else should be involved in this decision? And so what they do is they realized, oh, wait a minute, on this decision, we get involved as if somebody comes to us with something, we get involved in that. And we ask a lot of questions, and we want to say, well, show me why. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? On the people issue, we sit there and say, okay. Well, if that's what you want to do, sounds good. And it's like, and these are the two most important assets of the company. On one, we manage it to make sure we're getting the maximum value. On the other, we don't manage it and hope we get the maximum value.
But I also think that HR ends up taking a lot of those decisions because leaders don't. And, all my career until I, came across Talent Chess, I was absolutely convinced, like many HR professionals, that leaders choose not to do, not to spend so much time in the people area because they're not incentivized enough. Because the incentives are always related to, business results and everything. So, therefore they spend all their time in business, in delivering business results. And then, using Talent Chess with my leadership team, what I realized was that, no, it's not that. It's the fact that leaders actually are rational people, typically. And because they're rational people, they like numbers and they like, rational things and rational decisions. So in the business area, they find comfort because there they can calculate return on investment, they can calculate risk, so they feel safe and comfortable. But in the area of people, they cannot calculate return on investment. They cannot calculate risk. It feels subjective. It feels emotional. So they don't feel comfortable there. So what happens? It's an unconscious migration from the people area into the business area. So once Talent Chess does exactly this. So basically, Talent Chess gives them ways of calculating return on investment and adding numbers. So when they look at an organization chart, they immediately now learn where they have to focus and how to add numbers to that. And just by doing this, they automatically start to move back without any preaching, to them. They start to move back into the people area and making decisions about people because now they feel comfortable. They can calculate those decisions.
Yeah, it is very interesting because I'm thinking now that maybe some of the managers are holding themselves to take these kind of decisions because, humans are not resources. If you look at them as resources, you are blamed. Mm-hmm. Oh, come on. You are not, you're.
Yeah. I had a client who said, but we're a highly humanistic culture, here. And I said, but the problem is you're mixing up things because you're mixing up, making the decision with executing the decision. You have to make your decision in a scientific, numbers-based, business-focused way. You have to implement that decision in a human way, respectfully and so on. Yes, but those are two completely different things. But many leaders and many organizations mix up those things, so they make the decisions in a there's not necessarily a human way, but they make thinking there. Yeah. And I had, a very, very, I think I can mention that. So I was at Microsoft, right? And we had this guy who for 3 years in a row had a poor performance, so below what Microsoft considered acceptable performance. And the guy was a very nice guy. I mean, everybody liked him and so on. And his manager, because, wanted to be human, right, didn't communicate the tough message, which is your performance is really not where it should be for 3 years in a row. So now 3 years later, right, everybody gets frustrated. Okay, so the company gets frustrated, the boss's boss gets frustrated, and they start asking questions, what are you doing with this guy? Because, he's not performing for 3 years in a row. So now the guy is under, the manager of the guy is under pressure and, has this very, very tough conversation with him, which for the guy was a shock because it was, it was coming from nowhere, from a blue sky. All of a sudden, now I thought that I was, liked and, and appreciated in this company. Now, all of a sudden, you're telling me for 3 years, I wasn't there. So it was a shock for everyone. So was this better for the guy? Was this human for the guy? No, it was terrible. It was terrible because he ended up being fired, under complete shock. So isn't it better to, judge things in a rational way and say, your performance is not where it should be. This is where it should be. How can I help you? Do it immediately. That's a rational decision. And execute it in a human way. How can I help you? Do you need anything? Is there anything going wrong, that, maybe I can help with or something?
Yes, it's the same perspective when we are talking about the layoffs, because right now in probably in the United States too, but in Europe and in Romania, we know that there are some companies, big companies, that they are making these layoffs based on, reorganization, cost efficiency, whatever, less of orders or volume of work. And there are voices over LinkedIn, most probably you saw them too, that they are saying that it's not normal for the companies to fire people. They should, I don't know what.
What can they say?
And I think that they are out of the planet saying that because those companies are businesses.
So they are businesses, and any company that misallocates its financial capital becomes weaker. But if you misallocate your human capital, you also become weaker. Sometimes those types of layoffs are not avoidable because the underlying reason is, a change in technology or in the environment, like AI. There are all these forecasts and different opinions on that there's going to be massive amounts of job loss because of AI. I don't know whether that's true or not true, but that's not because companies did not do a good job of managing their talent. But in other situations, it's been years of, doing as Vlad was saying, not truly managing the talent, not making sure that they were getting the maximum value out of the talent that they had, not developing their talent to ensure that they were competitive in the marketplace, that let their position degrade to the point at which the only solution was to get rid of a whole bunch of people, which they could have avoided if they had done the right things along the way. And I think that, it's always a little bit of a mix, but well-run companies that have good talent management tend not to do as many layoffs because they do the little things along the way. Nobody can avoid it completely because, again, sometimes it's just externally driven shocks. But the better job you do of managing your talent, of allocating your human capital, the less likely you're going to need to make those kind of changes.
Even if you have to do that, at least your employees will have better chances to find other jobs if they were in a good culture. Exactly as Vlad said, if that guy was,
executing the decision humanly. And it's interesting, I was talking to a colleague of mine, a former colleague of mine, when we were in Croatia 2 days ago. And I had dinner with her and I said, so how did you leave the company? And she said, well, it was basically, this is how I left the company. But then my boss was actually helped me because I decided I want to set up my own company. And he actually helped me with the contracts I got in the first year of work, which is the most difficult, when you get started.
Yeah.
If you as a people leader, a leader of people, shift your frame for, oftentimes what they're trying to do is, I want to make sure that all of my employees are happy and that they feel good, which on the surface is a terrific thing. You would want that. But I found that in my own career, I was the practice leader at 2 large consultancies. I had thousands of consultants who, not all directly, but ultimately report. And I told my leaders, I said, no, your job is to make sure each of your people are successful. Not that they're happy, that they're successful. Now, people who are successful are always happy, but they're happy because they're successful. So if somebody is not being successful in their role, your job as a leader is to help them find a role in which they can be successful. Hopefully that's a role within the company. Sometimes that may be a role outside of the company. But at the end of the day, what individuals want and what you should want as a leader is for all of your people to be successful. And that's a sort of slightly different way of looking at that your role as a leader. But if you do that, you will create a much higher level of performance, and you will more likely not need to go through those traumatic reorganizations, because teams of highly successful people tend not to need that.
And it's even easier to define successful than happiness.
Exactly, because successful is about what the company needs. And again, people feel when they feel like they are a success, overwhelmingly most people are highly engaged and highly happy, because it's how we're wired. Yeah, it's a good feel. You feel like you're contributing. You feel like you're valuable. But if you're not successful in the role, and I just focus on trying to make you happy, either by protecting you and not telling you the truth, or by protecting you by not giving you as much responsibility, so that you can just kind of continue to do what you're done, or kind of move you to the side. One, the individual tends to see it and they don't feel good about it, and the company isn't getting the value out of it, so it becomes kind of a lose-lose as opposed to a win-win.
Give us some wisdom out of Talent Chess. What are you doing there differently? What is your, salt and pepper?
So Talent Chess there are 2 things. Talent Chess is a simulation that creates a learning experience for leaders to help them understand how to make better talent decisions. And talent decisions is ultimately what we are trying to build in the organization. Again, the company that makes the best decisions around talent will win in the marketplace. So, and a piece of wisdom around that is stop focusing on people.
Okay.
So, it's a provocative statement.
Yeah.
And we say it for effect.
Explain yourself.
And it's actually stop starting from people.
That's right. Most leaders start from the person and say, how do I get this person to be better at what they're doing? And we differentiate that there are 2 types of talent management. There is a people leader and there is a talent leader. A people leader is about the individual. It's about inspiring, engaging, relating, motivating, all of the ing words in English. And it's behavioral, and it's about how leaders inspire performance. A talent leader is about making better decisions, and they focus on the role. The people leader says, how can I get Vlad to be a better performer in the role that he is? The talent leader moves Vlad aside, looks at the role and says, am I strong enough in that role to win? Or do I need to be strong, based on my strategy and how important that role is to my strategy, can I win with that level of performance in the role? So talent management is about strengthening roles as opposed to developing people. Now, you strengthen roles by developing people, but what you're focused on is strengthening roles. So where you can see this best is in the most talent-driven industry in the world, professional sports. And in professional sports, you have two roles. Generally, you have the coach role, and the coach role is saying, how do I build the skills in my players so they can play the game, whatever game they're playing, better? But then there's the other role, which is called different things in different sports, things like the club president role. They're thinking about, do I have the roster that can win a championship? And you can use your Liverpool example.
Yeah, I mean, if you take, yeah. So if you're looking at the winner of Premier League, where they spend like dozens of millions on talent, and if you look at the salaries that they're paying, the highest paid salary in Liverpool is 24 million euros per year, but the lowest is 500,000. Okay. Now the difference is.
I'm just okay.
yeah, it's hard. Yeah, the difference is 4,800% between the two, and those guys are all peers. They're all players on the same team, with more or less the same level of education, more or less the same level of experience.
And they know about each other's salaries.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you can find them on internet very easily. They're all transparent. Moreover, if you're looking at the salaries between 10 million and 24 million in that team, you'll only have 5 people who are paid between 10 million and 24 million. And regardless how long you would look at those names and how big of a specialist you are in football, you will not be able to make sense of why this is 24, why this is 10, and why this other guy is 500,000. And the only way in which you can start making sense of it is to forget about the names of those people and replace them by the positions in which they play on the field. And what you will notice will be that the first 4 roles in that team in Liverpool are attack roles, and the 5th one is the center, and the center basically coordinates the attacks. So what that tells you is that they have a very, very offensive strategy. So their strategy is to have an offensive that cannot be stopped. Okay? So that means that we're actually looking at the strategy, and the strategy defines what are the critical roles to execute a strategy. And in those roles, you need the best talent in the world. Okay, so going back maybe to Jason's analogy with the general manager and the coach, is not an analogy, it's actually the roles in professional sports. The role of the general manager of a club or club president is to have the ambition, the vision, to say, I want to win Premier League 10 years down the road. And in order to get there, what I need is to have my strategy is going to be to have the strongest offensive. And for that offensive to happen, I need those critical roles. In those critical roles, I need the best talent in the world.
Have you determined the skills of each roles?
They would know what type of skills, yes, they would need in those roles. And once they hire the best talent in the world, they give it to the coach, and the coach basically extracts the maximum of performance from them. Or in corporate terms, the coach is the people leader, okay? And the people leader, they do coaching, they do training, they do engagement, they do motivation, they do team dynamics, so everything that we know. But who does the role of the general manager in the corporation? Who has the vision, strategy, defines the critical roles, and gets the best talent in the world?
Actually, the CEO should be.
Exactly. Absolutely. That's the way it should be. And you do have great examples of CEOs who are doing that, but not because we have educated them, but because they have self-educated, because they had the curiosity or maybe right intuition of doing it. But the problem is that all CEOs, all senior leaders, should understand that there are actually two roles that are, in the case of an organization, played by the same person who is themselves. So who educates them to do this? And this is exactly what Talent Chess does, to your question.
It is always also the problem of the direct managers, the middle managers, that they should be focused on all these activities that you said a little bit earlier: coaching, training,
Yes.
exploit the most potential from their team, which they are not doing, because they said, or most of the people said, that this is the HR role.
Yeah.
So, but there are two kinds of ways that you step back. We teach people in our workshops the difference between performance and potential. And performance is about how you get somebody to do more or be better at what they do. So we call them more and better. And then potential is about being able to do things that are new or different from what they're doing today. So we have this distinction between, and again, we try and say that most high performers are in fact not high potentials. And the research has shown that it's somewhere in the 20 to 30% range of high performers are also high potentials. Most high performers are high performers. And so it's about getting them to do more or be better. And that's where those things like coaching, training, stretching their goals, those things will get you more and better. To develop potential, you need to give people new and different experiences. And so potential is developed through mobility. You either move the person to the experience, changing roles, rotational programs, internal internships, those types of things, or you move the experience to the person through special assignments or by redesigning roles to move responsibilities around. So the way in which you develop your high potentials is by giving them new and challenging experiences. It's not by doing those other things. And that cannot be done by HR. The only person who can do that are the leaders in terms of, and that's why we call the game Talent Chess. Think of it as, the game of chess is you're moving your pieces on the chessboard to create a strong position. You're trying to do the same thing with your talent. You need to move your talent to different, you need to move your best talent to the roles that have the biggest impact, the most critical roles, and to create a stronger position and to give people new and different experiences which will develop their potential. So you cannot train and coach and do all those things to a strong talent bench strength. The only way you can get to a strong talent bench strength is by moving your people to a bench strength. And that only the leader can do. And that's why but if they don't know that that's what they need to do, because there's this tension in every organization between sort of the business of today, which is all about performance, and the business of tomorrow, which is all about potential. And obviously, and in that tension, the business of today always tends to weigh more. It dominates because it's more urgent. It's oftentimes more quantitative. The business of tomorrow we're less certain of or whatnot. But organizations that solely focus on the business of today find themselves, when the changes happen or it's a new environment, they're unprepared. And so you can't do all of the business of today and just focus on performance. You have to develop enough potential for when those new and different things are required, you have people capable of doing it. So think of it as a portfolio. We need so much of our focus on today and so much of our focus on tomorrow. But left to their own accords, if we don't educate leaders and put in place the right mechanisms, they will solely focus on the business of today.
Being very, very pragmatic, to your point, we see this, right? But how do you get leaders to see it as well? And it's very difficult because those guys, majority of them work 14 hours a day or whatever. So you as HR going as a function and saying, now, you know what, this is your responsibility, they're going to go, are you crazy? Because, I'm already working 14 hours. Where can I fit more responsibilities? This is going to be their first reaction. But, the beauty of using a virtual simulation in the game is that they experience the fact that nobody else can make those decisions. So it doesn't take HR to preach to them or to try to convince them of anything. They are getting convinced by playing the game that nobody else can make those decisions. And I was telling you that, when I was a client, I realized that this is it. Because, all of a sudden, overnight, my leaders got to understand that this is their responsibilities without me having to tell them anything.
I have a tricky question, delicate question. Who is more suitable to be promoted, the potential or the high performer? Because most of the people are expecting to be the high performer.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's what happens.
So I have been a consultant, my entire career. So of course my answer is, it depends. So again, your high performer is going to excel in that next level role if that next level role is about doing more or better at the things that the role that they're currently in is doing. If it's a straight progression of roles. If that next level role, though, involves things that are new and different, then the high potential is going to excel in that role much more. And that's what we see in organizations. High performers, they'll tend to get promoted relatively quickly in a fairly straight, narrow, vertical path. But they reach a ceiling where they go from just being able to do one thing to now they have to do many things. And they don't have the breadth. They haven't developed enough of that new and different to make that next step. Whereas the high potential, they sometimes will take a more circuitous path, but that gives them the experiences that they need so that when they go from sort of leader of one to leader of multiple, they are capable of being the leader of multiple, or the high performer can generally just be the leader of one.
Let me maybe give you an example that I really like, that of Netflix. And I give Netflix as an example because they've gone through numerous transformations as an organization. So if you look at them, they started from renting video cassettes, okay? And then they had more stores renting more video cassettes. And then they thought about maybe taking the video cassettes to the consumer directly, So that's a transportation business, okay? Distribution business. Now that's a very, very different animal, okay? From, sitting in a shop and just renting cassettes. Then they got into video streaming. Again, something completely different. Then they got into producing content. Okay, and digital distribution and digital subscriptions and so on. So all the time, there was an element of more and better of what they always did, which was more video content to more consumers. But then at the same time, there was always something new going on. Okay, now we get into video streaming. Now we get into video production. Now we get, okay? So the people who can do this are different from the people who can do the other. So the people who can do more and better are different from the people who can do new and different. And now I'm very black and white, because 4.5% of the population can do both. But that percentage is so small that we can say that they're completely different species. Now the thing is, when you have an opening in the organization, whom are you going to hire? You're going to hire someone with a linear CV that you can easily interpret, or AI can easily interpret, and say, I'm sure that this guy can do this job because, they always did it. Okay, you want somebody who's a plug and play, who is going to hit the ground running. No problem with that. The only problem is that in time, what happens is you only get people with those linear CVs who are what we call more and better people. And then a black swan event hits you, okay, like a COVID, like, or AI, or yeah. So many things, we can think of recently, especially. And then the organization is rigid, and the CEO comes to us and says, my organization is resistant to change. Well, yeah, because, every single cell that you have hired, you've put into that organism is fundamentally to resist the change. So again, we're not saying at all that now you need to replace your more and better people, because typically I like to call them backbone employees, because those are the ones who typically deliver most of the results of the organization. So definitely you need those. But then you also need to understand what are the parts of the organization that will need to change, that will need to innovate, that will need to create themselves or to invent the market. And there you need to put your new and different people.
Take it a little further, because it's an interesting thing that we just did this at one of our workshops for a client in Croatia earlier this week. So one of the exercises we do is we give them 3 personas. One persona is sort of your classic high potential superstar performer, but they're just very good at what they do. They don't have a whole lot of breadth. The second persona is sort of your classic high potential, exceeds at whatever they do, but they tend to wander a bit. And then the third persona is sort of the shooting star, the person who's like going to produce fantastic results, but it's going to be a rocky journey along the way, because that's kind of how they are. And then we have them talk about the 3 different personas and identify, kind of what it is about them. And then we say, you have this big strategic project that you need to get done, and that's going to have a big impact on the results of the business. Which one do you put in there? And this was a group of 10. And, 3 of them, 4 of them put the shooting star. Said it's going to be a rocky road, but if it's, ultimately what's most important is who's going to really drive the most. 3 of them put the high potential, to say, I don't want to take the risk with the shooting star, but I want the high potential in there. And 3 of them put the high performer. And so I said, see, this is the problem. You as a leadership team, the most senior people in this organization, you're all walking around with different definitions of good and different and have a different approach to how we should be approaching our most critical roles. So if you're doing it your way and you're doing it your way, if you're developing the high, putting the high performer in there, you're putting the high potential in there, and somebody else is putting, when you add it all up, we have mush. And we don't make organizational Now, there's a good argument to say we should put the high performer, or we should put the high potential, or we should put that. But as a leadership team, if you're going to get good at talent, you need to be aligned at when are the times that we do that, when are the times that we choose, each one of those, so that consistently across the organization, leaders are making talent decisions with the same mindset, the same definition of good, and the same desired outcome, so that we organizationally will make progress. And that does not happen naturally. We just assume that everybody makes the same decision. And what we find out in the room, they looked around and said, what do you mean you're going to put that person in there?
And what they realize is that, yes, we do spend a lot of time talking about business decisions, but we do not spend a lot of time talking about people decisions. And this is, they realize themselves, you don't have to come and preach, or tell them anything, because they go like, oh, it's obvious, we need to spend a lot more time talking about those things.
This is one of the reasons that I say that HR should be on board.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but doesn't put it on board.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Unfortunately, I have a bad news for me, because we already spent an hour talking. But if you want to add something, maybe about what you are doing, maybe what you're doing here in Romania right now. We've
been on a what should we call it? A city
Roadshow.
A road show. Yeah, pretty much.
On tour with the band.
Yes, on tour with a band in Europe. So we spent a week in Germany, basically going from city to city with our partners there, which is an organization called MAC GmbH. And we demoed actually what we do to their clients, to their traditional clients. And then we went back home, for the weekend, and then we continued this week in Croatia with a client there, with their top executive team, with a two days workshop, which was really, really impactful. And then we flew to Bucharest to work with our partner Qualians, who represents Talent Chess in Romania, and they have all the expertise that we're talking about. It's delivered by our partners here. And we also had a demo this morning. We had 25 participants from a lot of major organizations in Romania, some of them Romanian, some of them international, business and HR. And we also did a demo and explanations about what we're doing, answered all questions to the participants. And we also have a number of business meetings. So today and tomorrow. So this is what we do now.
Wonderful. We will put the links to your profiles, LinkedIn profiles in the description. So the people, if they want to contact you, they can do that. They can also come to Smart HR event because Vlad will be there at least.
And also our partners, the link to our partner site, Qualians.
Yes. Yeah. So this is it. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you very much for our viewers also for being with us, and see you next time. Bye.
Leadership in Bluejeans este un proiect al comunității Smart HR. Comunitatea Smart HR este internațională, online și facilitează activități și acțiuni cu și despre people management. Dacă vrei să fii alături de noi și să vezi ce inițiative am pus în practică, urmează linkul din descriere și înrolează-te!
Dacă ți-a plăcut atmosfera din acest episod, trebuie să știi că suntem la centrul ECA. ECA nu este doar o gazdă primitoare, ci un one-stop shop pentru companiile care pun preț pe sănătatea mentală. De la psihoterapie până la programe complexe de well-being corporate, găsești totul sub același acoperiș. Mai mult decât atât, mansarda aceasta versatilă poate găzdui activitățile echipei tale, de la workshop-uri sau ședințe de strategie pe care poate le vrei organizate într-un cadru mai relaxat. Iar dacă vrei să produci conținut video, podcasturi sau materiale corporate, spațiul acesta îți stă la dispoziție. Suntem centrul ECA, suntem well-being, conexiune și un spațiu dedicat ideilor tale. Haideți să ne cunoaștem!